understand them, you've got to look at the history of him and his representatives. They're a pretty acquisitive bunch.
Yeah.
I think if you analyse but Paul's just alluded to it there, if you analyse the spat that they had last week when he was substituted at the very end of the game, I think the stat is something like Tevez has been substituted for just 32 minutes of all games this season. Now, to be taken off a couple of minutes from the end of a game is usually the manager, and I believe Tevez scored the winning goal in that game, I'm not sure, but it's usually a sign that he's getting an ovation from
he scored the only goal of the game.
The fans.
Yeah.
Now, you know, would you really react that violently to be taken off with a few minutes to go? If he'd been taken off after 50 minutes and been hauled off, then there'd be an element of humiliation to that. I can't see any humiliation in Tevez being substituted with a couple of minutes to go.
Yeah, you're clearly going down the road of unhappy with what's going on at City behind the scenes for Tevez, rather than the homesickness there.
I think I am, yeah. And you know, whether that proves to be correct in the end, I don't know. Maybe there are all kinds of elements coming together here, but it does sound very suspicious that 4 or 5 weeks ago, Tevez and his advisors were speaking to Manchester City about an improved contract, playing contract.
Right.
Now, you know, when you've got that in the background, you know, it's difficult to see any other reason for wanting to go, and maybe the other elements are smoke screens.
It's interesting, the point you made about Rooney, for instance, because Sir Alex Ferguson, in smoothing that over, was very critical of his agent. Obviously, his agent's Paul Stretford, and this time, maybe that Tevez needed to be better advised behind the scenes as well.
Well, Tevez, I think, is an industry, really. He just keeps moving, doesn't he? Keeps going from place to place, you know. And all the while, the incentive, I think, is to up the ante on the income and the benefits to his advisors. I think that's pretty clear. And twice now we've had star players agitating either for more money or a move, you know, before the Christmas period, before the January transfer window. So what that tells you is that this is a tactic now of advisors, agents, star players to provoke clubs and try and force them into increasing the wage packet. I think, encouragingly for City, they were really good at West Ham yesterday. They're joint top on points with Arsenal. A lot of City fans may be thinking, well, if we lose Tevez, it's all over, we're ruined, you know. But actually, City are in an increasingly strong position. And I know it was the bottom team in the league, but I thought they showed yesterday that they can manage without him if they have to.
Yeah,
and they'll buy somebody else as well.
Yes, they will. I mean, obviously that is. With Rooney, Fergie was a huge element. I'm not sure if they've got that element at City to smooth things over like that. They haven't got anyone to put an arm around the shoulder if there's no respect behind the scenes there as well.
No, it's difficult. And Tevez, there are contradictions with Tevez. You know, because on the one side, we see him play, and there's probably not a manager in the world that wouldn't want him in their team with that kind of work ethic. And yet he gave an interview recently where he actually said he was considering quitting football altogether.
Yes.
So he's quite a complex character, clearly, and whether he would respond to anybody there, you know, in terms of an arm round the shoulder, I'm not sure. You know, Gary Cook famously sort of welcomed him with that big hug when he arrived, but it sounds like there isn't that kind of relationship where he'd want a hug from Gary Cook anymore, the chief executive. So it's you know, unless he can make his wife suddenly realise, as Steve and I know, what a great place Manchester is to live, and you know, unless he can convince her of that, unless I don't know, it seems like
I think
a complete impasse.
One of the key issues here, that if he is homesick, then there's only possible one solution to it.
Go home.
Go home.
Yeah.
So I think that will become evident. I mean, if it becomes clear that he's agitating for a move in January,
yes,
a move where to River Plate, where to?
Yeah,
because he can. If he is homesick, there's only one place he can go, because we understand his two children are in Buenos Aires in Argentina.
Yeah.
So,
presumably a move to Spain, which obviously is going to invite all the criticism that it's just for money, but presumably a move to Spain would be more acceptable to
the wife and the family.
Yeah, because it would be more like home, I guess. But
yeah, but still travelling, aren't you?
But it's still Europe, isn't it? I mean, it's not South America.
No, but it's more closely associated.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just intrigued all the time by the relationship between the players and Mancini. Brian Kidd said yesterday, didn't he, that Mancini reminds me a little bit of Sir Alex Ferguson when he first started. The toughness, the desire to win.
Yeah.
I mean, is he actually too tough with these players or not?
I don't think so. I think he's doing a great job. I really do. I mean, you know, even when he was getting some criticism, I still think he's the man that will deliver Manchester City, particularly this season, what they need, and that's Champions League football.
Yeah.
He's got a track record of winning wherever he's been. And let's face it, when you've got a collection of highly paid players like he has, imports, and, you know, Paul quite rightly, in some sense, will use the word mercenaries, you know, they're hired guns, a lot of them. And, you know, you have to question whether some of them would be there if it wasn't for the huge money they were getting.
Yeah.
So, you know, in that respect, Mancini, I think, has done a great job to get City in the first season of collecting all these individuals together at the top of the table.
But that's why it's an important moment for City, because this is their chance to be like Manchester United, in the sense that if you cause trouble at Manchester United, they will destroy you, they will eliminate you. You shouldn't be allowed to do it at City either. And part of the problem of playing all that money is that you will get people who are only there for the money, as Steve says. Now, you have to deal with that. Robinho, they dealt with that in the end. They got rid of him. There were other troublemakers there who've been purged. Tevez is not such a great player that he can be allowed to disrupt the whole workings of the club. And this is the club's chance to say, if you don't like it, go away.
Yes.
It's an important moment for the club, because otherwise, if they bow to that kind of player pressure and player power, then Mancini will lose all kind of control of his dressing room. You know, we saw this with Cristiano Ronaldo a couple of years ago when he wanted to leave Manchester United, and, you know, they kept him for another season, but he was always going from the moment he said he wanted to go. And I suspect that, you know, Tevez will not be here at the start of next season.
But that was handled so much better, wasn't it? Like, you know, Ronaldo never disrespected the club.
No.
You know, it was you know, his respect for Ferguson and the enduring respect that Ferguson has for Ronaldo.
Yeah,
there's still a major love in there, isn't there?
Sure.
And you haven't got that respect behind the scenes,
no,
obviously.
No,
That's
we saw that at the end of last week.
Yeah.
Partially to do with the fact, and Paul and I were talking about this before, Argentinian footballers basically don't have an affinity for the English game as maybe some other foreign players do.
Yeah.
You know, United were in this situation with Gabriel Heinze. You know, a contract dispute. I mean, you know, you have to ask the question, why would anybody want to leave Manchester United?
Yes.
You know, when they're winning things. Why would anybody in the current climate want to leave Manchester City when they're on the cusp of something great, perhaps?
Yes.
Just doesn't make sense.
This aggravation, though, I mean, you've had Adebayor moaning about the manager. You had the touchline, and you saw another striker yesterday. Virtually snubbed. I mean, he virtually snubbed, didn't he, the manager, when he went off?
Well, he completely snubbed him, yes. It was Balotelli's behaviour was completely bizarre. He was angry from the minute he got on the pitch. He punched a goal post, he was throwing his arms around, he didn't celebrate the first goal with the other players. He was completely detached from the rest of the team. And after about an hour, Mancini felt he'd seen enough. Balotelli had been booked for dissent. I think he could see him getting sent off. Off he came and walked straight down the tunnel. Now, this is a 20-year-old multi-millionaire who's playing at a top football club, the richest club in the world. What his problem is, I can't imagine why he's so irritated all the time. I can't begin to guess. But actually, Mancini, he could be in any other club. People would be saying, you've just bought this guy for £24 million, and he's sort of borderline crazy, crackers. So you're going to have to answer for this, but actually he's getting away with it because he's doing so well in other areas. He can afford to say, well, he's a long-term project, just, you know, I'll sort him out. But actually, Balotelli shows no signs of wanting to be sorted out, and I don't see how he's going to contribute.
Yes. I mean, if you're the manager, how do you deal with that? I mean, do you let it go? I mean, you've now got Tevez, Adebayor, and Balotelli in your face, basically.
Yeah, well, occasionally...
And will the other players be looking and saying, well, how's the manager going to deal with this? You know.
Oh, certainly, yeah. That was one of the impressive things yesterday about City. I think the other players knew that they got an oddball in their midst, you know, but they still got on with the game. I mean, I noticed Yaya Toure trying to just coax and coach Balotelli and trying to sort him out mentally on the pitch. It wasn't really working. But some of the other players will be thinking, do we have to have this kid sulking on the pitch? You know, we're trying to win. We're trying to get into the Champions League.
Yes.
You know, we can't indulge this 20-year-old, you know, who doesn't appear to want to be here. But yesterday they got on with it quite impressively. But longer term, some of those senior players, I think, will say we can't have this guy in the team if he's going to behave that way.
No. Looking at City yesterday, and they obviously joint top. Do they sustain that? Can you see good signs from the team developing and emerging to stay in the top four and challenge even for the Premier League this season?
I can now, yes, because I think Mancini's first job was to make them hard to beat, to sort out the back of the team, and he was criticised in doing that for being too negative. I think now that he has done that, they're starting to play a bit more positively, a bit more fluidly, and there's a great benefit all of a sudden. David Silva has started to look like their Luka Modric, you know, their playmaker. I mean, he was all over the pitch yesterday, and he looked like a seriously good player, which people always thought he was. Had a pretty bad start to his time at City, but now he's the sort of fire player who can make things happen. He's the sort of number 10 who floats around the pitch and orchestrates.
Yes.
And that's a big plus for City now, because they didn't have that sort of player before.
Yes. Can they do that, just before we end on City, can they do that without Tevez, maintain the challenge?
The problem they've got at the moment is Tevez is the main goal scorer, and you know, he's seen by the fans as the Rooney, if you like, of Manchester United. He's the fans' hero, so it's going to be difficult for them to negotiate that. But again, if a player wants to leave the club, then you know, usually fans stick with the club rather than the player.
And do you think Tevez will go in January? Which is obviously what he wants, according to all these reports.
I'm not convinced, because the question is, where does he go?
Yeah.
And it would be an awful lot of money, and you know, I think Real Madrid have spent their money for the year, and Barcelona, you know, it's accommodating him somewhere, isn't it? And I think it'll be difficult to move him in January.
Yeah, interesting. It's not going to end there, is it? It's the saga. We say this every week, headlines coming out of City. Always controversy at City, and always headlines.